operation to recover and burn off billions of gallons of oil gushing into the Gulf every single day.
Also on this day 63, worried they may have to say goodbye to the only way of life they've ever known. The psychological impact of the spill on the children of the Gulf.
But now if you look at the animals, I feel very bad for them because it looks like they're floating in chocolate.
And in New York, the Times Square bomber pleads guilty and makes a new threat.
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric reporting tonight from the Gulf Coast.
Good evening, everyone. We're in Venice, Louisiana tonight. In good times, the departure point for many fishing boats. Now one of the main staging areas for the oil cleanup. BP said today it spent $2 billion on the spill, including $105 million to compensate 32,000 victims. CEO Tony Hayward, who's been a walking PR disaster, shunned oil skimmers for a yacht race over the weekend. Now he's canceled his speech in London tomorrow, saying he has to focus on the Gulf Coast. Oil continues to gush into the Gulf by one measure, enough so far to fill more than 9,000 average-sized living rooms. Shifting currents are pushing the oil northeast toward Alabama and the Florida Panhandle. And the no fishing zone has expanded to 36% of the federal waters in the Gulf. In a CBS News New York Times poll out tonight, 43% of Americans approve of President Obama's handling of the spill. Only 13% approve of BP's efforts. Once again, we have a team of correspondents on this story, covering it from every conceivable angle. And today, I flew out to the source, some 50 miles south of here.
Flying into the fiery front line of this disaster, the scope of the operation becomes clear.
I think of it more of a challenge than a frustration. Every day, we're fighting a different battle. The circumstances here are changing all the time. And what I'm most impressed with is that we have been very adaptive.
Each monstrous piece of equipment serves a purpose. These rigs are drilling the two critical relief wells, which will connect to the damaged line. Heavy drilling mud will be pumped in to plug the leak for good. They hope.
The relief wells that are currently being drilled have to hit a target roughly the size of a dinner plate 3 miles below the water's surface. If they move too slowly or miss their mark, the oil will just keep on spewing.
But until then, job one, recovery and disposal.
Two complicated operations are underway about 200 feet below us to deal with the 2 million gallons a day that are spewing into the Gulf. One is a rig collecting about 750,000 gallons of oil a day. Much of it can be used later. A second vessel then is collecting 420,000 gallons and then burning it off. The combined effort accounts for about half of what is spewing out of the broken well.
The one you see to the right is the Discoverer Enterprise, and then off to the left is the Q4000.
What is the Discoverer Enterprise doing?
The Discoverer Enterprise is drawing product directly off of the well, and they're able to hold the product. Right now, they're getting about 15,000 barrels a day that they're able to draw off of the main line and store.
As for its neighbor, the Q4000,
it doesn't have the capacity to store any of it, so instead what we're doing is burning it. It's kind of like a Bunsen burner on steroids.
I see those giant water hoses spraying the deck. That's because obviously that vessel gets pretty darn hot.
That's correct. The water is to keep the temperature down on the rig so that we can sustain the flame.
Where there's smoke, there are other fires as well.
Environmentalists must be worried about this smoke. Look at it, billowing into the atmosphere.
I would think this is the best option that we have right now, because we know that we're getting oil here, as opposed to skimming where we have the mixture of oil and water.
It's a relentless enemy. 33,000 people are now fighting it, including 1,800 at the site we flew over. And 6,000 vessels have been deployed, more than were used during the D-Day invasion. Investigators are still trying to zero in on what went wrong the night the Deepwater Horizon exploded. Cheryl Atkinson is following that part of the story. Cheryl, new documents point to one piece of equipment on that doomed rig.
That's right, Katie. It's a critical part of the blowout preventer and would have made all the difference had it worked.
It's called a blind shear ram, and it's supposed to stop the flow of oil if all else fails. Huge pinchers with blades close around the drill pipe and cut it off. But when Deepwater Horizon's crew tried to engage the pinchers, they wouldn't close all the way. Over and over, the crew struggled to make it work, but in the end, this last line of defense failed.
Once the blind shear ram failed, the blowout preventer simply couldn't do its job. Katie?
And Cheryl, we have a question a viewer sent in to us via Twitter. Please ask BP if the Atlantis oil rig is using the same blowout preventer as the Deepwater Horizon.
We did ask BP, and they said a blowout preventer is not at play with the Atlantis because the blowout preventers are only used when the well is being drilled and before it's actually producing the oil. The Atlantis is in the oil production stage, and BP says there's a different system now that controls the oil flow. It's a system of valves inside the well and also a system of valves on top of the wellhead called a Christmas tree because it looks like sort of a busy Christmas tree. Katie?
Cheryl Atkinson. Cheryl, thanks very much. Deepwater drilling is suspended right now because of the Obama administration's 6-month moratorium. But that could be about to change. A federal judge in New Orleans today said he'll rule as early as tomorrow on a lawsuit to reverse that ban. The ban affects 72 of the nearly 4,000 oil platforms in the Gulf. More than a dozen companies that service them filed the suit to get back to business. The suit comes as our poll finds more than 3 out of 4 Americans believe oil companies should be subject to more government regulations.